All right, what's up guys? Mike Van Shellenbeck here again. I'm working on my red E36 sedan build. And if you recall in the last video, part 3, I was unsuccessfully cranking it and it didn't seem like I had any fuel. I was just trying to get it started. Well, I've already done a bunch of diagnosis today on the car, and I'm just gonna kind of talk about what I went through and where I'm at. Still not running, spoiler alert, but let's go look at some of this stuff. Okay, so basically I'm doing electrical diagnosis to figure out why my new relay isn't working. I external relayed the fuel pump in the back, and factory the fuel pump relay goes right here. Well, it seems to be working properly if I just jumper it outside of the car by just giving it voltage to pins 85 and 86 and grounding the other one. But for whatever reason, it's not getting a signal in the car. So this is the main relay, and this actually gives power to the fuel pump relay. If it's not getting the correct signal from the computer, then it won't do that. So for whatever reason, we've got an issue here. It's not triggering the factory fuel pump relay correctly. So I had this little jumper wire in here to just basically force power through this socket or through this relay holder to force the fuel pump to come on. And I heard it come on multiple times. I just put my ear over by the tank and I heard it come on, but I wasn't able to get any fuel flow out of the car. So I heard it come on, jumpered, but it still wouldn't start basically. So I unplugged the fuel return line, this front line that goes to the fuel rail right there. That's the return or the feed line. And basically I wanted to just turn the fuel pump on and see if I could get some fuel flow to come out of there, but I was not able to. Also, the reason I know this is the feed line, besides experience with these cars, is this little guy right here. If you can see, there's a cylindrical thing right there. That's the fuel pressure regulator on an OBD1 fuel rail. And the return line's always after the regulator because it's trying to maintain pressure within the rail. So, little side note. So I pulled off the feed line and wasn't able to get any fuel flow out of there, even jumpering the pump and everything. So I thought then, well, maybe the pump's wired backwards. So I just started going over here and excuse this electrical mess. I'm gonna clean all this up and get rid of all these connectors, but I was just testing all sorts of shit. Basically, I was driving myself crazy trying to figure out why this thing wasn't getting any fuel up to the rail. So I went back and checked my relay wiring and everything back here, and I went ahead and pulled the trigger wire off. So this is the wire that comes from the factory fuel pump relay up front, and for whatever reason I'm not getting a good trigger to this relay unless I jumper, like I said, in that socket up front. So what I was doing here is this is a test button, I guess you would call it, and all it does when you hit this button is connect these two alligator clips. So to energize this relay and test it, I just hook one alligator clip to the trigger side, which is pin 85 right here, and then the ground side's that brown wire back there, pin 86. And then so hook one side to the trigger, one side to power over there, and then just hit the button, and that will trigger this relay, which should then turn the pump on. Now, when I was manually triggering the relay, I still wasn't getting fuel flow out of the rail up front. I actually pulled the fuel pump hanger out and everything because I thought I might have had a split line inside. So I filled this bucket full of water and hooked it up to the battery, and sure enough, it flows just fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with the pump. So put it back in, still scratching my head. Hooked the line up again, manually triggered the relay with that button in the trunk, hooked it up to this line going to the rail, and I still wasn't able to get fuel flow out of the rail. So now I have a line coming out. This is where the fuel pump would feed, just out here, and as you can see, it's wet because it's working. All right, so basically I'll demonstrate this test procedure for you guys real quick. I'm gonna take one of these guys, hook it up to that little connection right hook up to that spade on the relay, and then I'll show you the test. So obviously when you're doing this kind of test, you want to be extremely careful that you're not touching the metal to metal anywhere, because I am going to be giving power from there to this connector. So if that's touching any metal anywhere else, it could arc. But now we just hit this button, and there's our fuel. So it is working, which what this tells us is that there's an obstruction in the fuel line somewhere between the pump outlet and the rail, and that's most likely going to be the fuel filter, which is under the car. So now that we know the pump's working, it's pumping out just fine, the relay's working. Still have to figure out why it's not being triggered properly with a factory relay, but we do at least have fuel, and the engine does run. We were just spraying some MAF cleaner in it a minute ago, and it was able to pop and make all sorts of noises. So figure out what the wiring issue is here. Seems like this is kind of a common issue when Googling, so I'll just figure that out, and we're almost there. I guess in the next video we'll be doing a fuel filter swap, apparently. Alright, what's up dudes? I wanted to show a little bit about some parts choices I'm making, just to include. One thing I talked about in a prior video was this fitting right here. So this goes in the intake manifold, seals with this O-ring on that surface, and then it has a little clip that goes and hooks into the factory plastic hook. The factory fitting is completely plastic, so that'll just break, but luckily the hook on the manifold itself is really strong. So the way this works, you just hook this over the manifold side, and then it screws together into this piece, so it holds it really tightly and seals well with this O-ring. So this is a great idea for boost, just like that maximum PSI boost proof ICV kit. This is another thing that you should get. So I'm going to go ahead and order one of those right now, and highly recommended. And then right now, another thing unfortunately I need to get is this package from CES Motorsports, and this is where the system, or the build rather, becomes a little bit less budget. So this is kind of something you need to do on these cars. So the BMW M50 and M52, S50, S52, they're all really good engines, but they have high compression ratio stock, and they're not really designed to go turbo stock. So you have to do a couple things if you want that to work really well. Number one, you need ARP head studs, and number two, you need a cut ring head gasket, and number three, if you're not going to run E85 and you want to run pump gas, or you want to run any significant amount of boost on stock internals, you really should lower the compression with this copper spacer. So this is a little spacer plate that goes on top of the block deck, and it just has a thickness on it basically to lower the compression, and then the head gasket goes on top of that. And they sell a package actually that includes, here's the combo deal, and this is what I'm actually going to be ordering. I can buy these parts with the exception of the copper spacer through my sources, and it's barely cheaper than this deal. So I highly recommend you guys just go, if you're going to turbo one of these cars and run, you know, 15 pounds of boost or 20 pounds of boost or anything more than about 8, I highly recommend 8 to 10, then I highly recommend you get this package, get the copper spacer. So I'm going to want this one. I have an 84 millimeter bore on my 325, my M50 TU engine. And so basically you choose the bore there because the cut rings for the head gasket are a certain size, these rings here, and then obviously the copper spacer is a certain bore diameter as well. So this is a really good value, highly recommended. I know it seems like a lot of money when we're talking about a budget build, but these engines actually are extremely strong, and this is the only thing I'm really going to be doing to this long block other than welding the oil pump nut to make like 400 wheels. So, you know, just go ahead and spring for this. You know, it's a bunch at one time, but it's really worth it in the end. So highly recommend that part, as well as the Reboot Engineering ICV clip. So hopefully that helps you guys choose some parts for your build. And that's it for that segment. Alright guys, super short and sweet video on that one. I know it was kind of a rushed little technical explanation of what was going on there, but basically sometimes you have random little issues that you can't figure out. You know, if the if I'm not getting fuel and I know that, check all the wiring. You know, some of the wiring wasn't working properly, so manually jumpering the relay was able to tell us that the fuel pump does in fact work, but there is an obstruction somewhere in the fuel line all the way up to the rail. So next video, I'll be jacking up the car and getting at the fuel filter, which is underneath near the frame rail, and we'll swap that out. I'm sure it's plugged all the way up, and hopefully we'll be able to get it running next time. So thank you guys so much for watching, and see you next time.